sidestep and a jam by Wembanyama.
This is the Morning Huddle on 94.1 San Antonio's Sports Star with Rob Thompson and the managing editor of Blogging the Boys, RJ Ochoa. Now, here's Rob and RJ.
Hey, gather around. We got something to talk about. It's the Morning Huddle. That's RJ Ochoa. I'm Rob Thompson. Easy E driving this boat as he always does. This hour, looking at the Spurs, trying to set a season standard and a standard the likes of which we have not seen since 83 and 84. Tonight is an opportunity to tie that. We'll look around the rest of the league, talk Dak Prescott, Troy Aikman, the NFL, and your calls and grievances will follow this hour or in the show. So we get the Spurs tonight, tipping at 7. Could make it 3 straight. It's been a long time in coming, but here we sit. But the backdrop we find very interesting. The conversation around Wemby, the flames are kind of heating up on the Spurs. I get a sense that there's a little bit of heat coming from the NBA and the pundits and general managers looking at the Spurs going, you've got that and you're still god-awful. Why? And how should the process play out? Well, that's a conversation we've been having for months. But now I think the rest of the NBA is kind of catching up to where Spurs fans are. Like, why aren't we better? And how long do we have to wait until we're competitive?
It sort of feels like, the friend that has something really cool at their house, and everybody's like, why don't you have us over more?
Right.
You have a pool. Like, why are we over at Jenkinson's house? All the time. Like, you've got the pool. You should be the one. We'll all bring the food. We'll all bring the potluck, and whatever. So the NBA says, Spurs, we want you to be more competitive. Every Spurs fan says, Spurs, we want you to be more competitive. All of France says, Spurs, we want you to be more competitive. The Spurs are like, guys, y'all don't get it. you just don't understand. This is the way. Well, this isn't the path to Mandalore. This is NBA basketball. And thankfully, the Spurs are starting to figure that out. I do think that they get another win tonight. I think they get 3 in a row for the first time.
I'm feeling it. I do think a third consecutive win is not only possible, but I think it's almost kind of probable given the way that the team has been playing over the last several games. And Wemby in particular, it is Houston. And Wemby in particular over the last 15 or 20. I mean, he just got named to his second consecutive Rookie of the Month award. The Rookie of the Year is foregone. It is a done deal. Even though Chet, whether you just define him as a rookie or not, has had a good year, it's just over. And I think because he's played so well and the numbers that he's throwing up, the 5x5, the new Wemby, is now gathering attention across the country. And we started talking about it last week, at least nationally. Again, everybody's late to our conversation. And we saw the TNT crew with Barkley preaching patience and Shaq and Kenny talking immediate improvement. What are you doing? Everybody in the NFL has a shelf life, and every minute wasted, you're not going to get back. Not everybody going to play till they're 40. They need to step on it. And we heard that from those, and now we're hearing it from the others, the Wendys, the Wojs, and the others. And they do have differing opinions, but I get the sense, no matter what, that the league and those that matter are leaning on the Spurs. Do something. We can't have this light that is Wemby kind of hidden underneath a bad basketball team that we can't put on national TV during the playoff run because there's better games, although not better talent.
Well, you got all mad about, speaking of Chet, last week's Thunder game not being the national game.
Right.
And I said at the time, somewhat astutely, some would say.
I would say.
How can you blame them? How can you blame TV producers for looking at the Spurs? I mean, today might not be the best example, but for the most of the season, and saying, yeah, Wemby's great, but we don't need this team. Nobody's sticking around to watch Trey Jones. Nobody's sticking around to watch Malachi. As fun moments as they've authored at different times. The reality is they stink, and the Spurs have to make sure that doesn't happen. And that means they have to go out and get other talent. They have to acquire different players. They have to turn their team into not just a competitive team, but a watchable team. That's the reality of who they are now. Is they are a part marketing arm for the league relative to the rest of the world. It's even in that sense. This isn't Wemby LeBron take. It's different than LeBron because LeBron was not an international superstar that came in with international prowess the way Wemby has. This has to be acknowledged and it has to be nurtured. You have to water this plant, Rob. Rob, you got a plant in the backyard. You haven't watered it in 3 months.
I'm planting the shade, and eventually that shade's going to help it. Like 3 years from now, that shade's going to be phenomenal. Right now, that plant's going to have to fend for himself. And that's kind of the way I think a lot of Spurs fans are looking at it. Now, there's two schools of thought. You got a bunch of draft picks. You got some young talent. You got Wemby. Go make some deals. You can get good fast. We've seen it happen. And then the other side is the Spurs tried and true method. And let's listen to Woj, because Woj, we all know who Woj is. He looks at it like the clock is ticking. This is him talking about how quickly they should get moving.
The Spurs can't treat this like a long-term rebuild. You hear these organizations, we can't skip steps. They've got to move quickly in putting a real team around him.
Like the sound of that for those of us that are willing to make the move. And I think Woj represents...
Who would not be willing? Who is that? I don't know this person. This is a Muppet. Like, you know what I mean? That this isn't a real person who you're describing. That's
I think there's a lot of guys that look at this and go, and this is my justification, RJ. And I'm kind of there's two different ways you can go. Maybe there's a middle road, but I do look at this like, okay, you've got Wemby, and you've got a little bit of talent, and you've got an opportunity to go do something with these vast. Think of this. The Spurs, as we sit right now, have 5 lottery picks in the next 3 years, or 2 years. 2 this year, 3 next. And that Toronto pick might kick from this to next. But next year, if we don't get it this year, it will not be protected. And it could be a number 1 overall, depending on where Toronto's going. So there's
I'm tired of could-be's and would-be's and hypotheticals.
No, you're right. But we watched what Oklahoma City did, and they have slowly grown it. We watched what Denver did, and they have slowly grown it. We watched what Minneapolis and Minnesota did. They slowly grew it. We watched what Milwaukee did. They slowly grew it. And all of them have gotten competitive in a moderate amount of time. I mean, they have managed to do it. But none of them had what the Spurs have in Wemby. The 5x5 is a regular occurrence. Nobody has had that, and we're going to get this on the regular. So you feel like, why waste time? Because you can get good fast.
So I think that there's a teeny bit of merit to what you said, but I push back against most of it. Do you think Giannis doesn't wish that the Bucks had been more aggressive earlier and sooner in his career? I mean, we gave the Bucks a lot of credit for trading for Dame this season. I mean, do you think Giannis, as happy as he was about that, is not of the mindset, oh man, that sure would have been nice. You know, like if I hadn't had to carry the show all by myself. Do you think Jokic is not all, hey, you know what? It would have been cool if, you cared a little bit more early in my career. We didn't have to wait this long for this to all finally take. Oklahoma City is kind of a more unique example. I would say Minnesota is in that sense as well. I mean, to go back to LeBron, I mean, a big reason why he left right at the very beginning was because they didn't water the plant. I mean, you cannot just be the arrogance involved to be willing to just burn a year is insane. I mean, to truly say, you know what, we're just going to throw this year away. I mean, with this all-world talent, is this anywhere near the peak version of Wemby? No, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't have been productive. And that, like, none of us are stupid enough to sit here and say, oh, man, if you had cared more, the Spurs would be in contention for the title this season. No, but the value of being in the mix and playing serious basketball and maybe being, in the playoffs, and even if you lose the opening series, there is so much more value in that than all the would-be's and could-be's, and maybe Toronto's pick won't be protected next year, and it can be ours. I mean, like, that is such a cowardly way of thinking.
I think it's cowardly in a sense that you just don't want to make a move to be blamed for it, and I do agree with that. And I think Brian Wright is kind of coming to that situation where you're going to have to be just about perfect to work this.
You got to poop or get off. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, that's where we're at.
Now, there is one thing that has changed over the years when you bring in superstars. It's not as easy to turn things around, 1. And 2, players have so much more say in the control of their brand and therefore their career. And Wemby has probably more control over his career and future than any player in the history of the NBA other than LeBron. LeBron came at a time and kind of set the table for what Wemby now has. His brand is as big as the team that he's playing for already. So when you look at what the Spurs want to do, you have to define or take into account what's Wemby's plan. And Woj talked about Wemby maybe dictating this timeline as much as Wright or Pop as well.
I think what this organization said before the season, coming into Victor Wembanyama's rookie year, is he will dictate essentially the timeline. This group will dictate the timeline for how quickly he's ready for speeding this thing up. I think he's delivered that message. This is a player who's going to be, we said this at the draft last year. He's going to be the best player at both ends of the floor by his third season in the NBA. I wonder if that wasn't too conservative. And by next season, he's going to win multiple MVPs. He's going to start winning them quickly. And the Defensive Player of the Year award will be retired in his name. No one else is ever going to win this, maybe after this year.
Oh, man, that sounds so good. I love hearing that. But, man, that's far away. That's far away.
It doesn't have to be far away. That's the whole point. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't mean that in a silly way, but I also think, while I completely agree that Wemby is so much in control, the reality that is ultimately outlined of, oh, well, the Spurs go as Wemby goes, then what do, like, I don't mean this in a literal way, but what do Brian Wright and Pop offer? Like, you know what I mean? If this is ultimately about, like, oh, well, everything changed because Wemby was better than everybody thought, then, well, if you didn't properly forecast that, then what are you doing? You know what I mean? If you actually were completely wrong about this whole timeline, then who's to say you deserve the benefit of the doubt relative to assessing the new timeline? Good point. And so, you can't just sit here and say, well, we're just going to wait until Wemby tells us what to do. What are you doing then? I mean, what do you do around here?
Right now, thinking back to a year ago or at the beginning of the season, is Wemby where you thought he would be? Is he ahead of schedule? Is he exactly what you thought? Is he behind? Did you think he was going to be a little bit more, which I can't imagine? Where is he in your mind?
I think the effect of the attrition was hard to predict. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've never used attrition in a good context because it's just every night. You know what I mean? Every night it's another, how did he do this? How is this possible? This is stupid. This is insane. This is ridiculous, whatever. And so having that happen over and over and over and over again was not necessarily anything I think anybody predicted. I think we all thought that he certainly was capable of all sorts of things, but until you get on the floor and you see it, it all is a dream. But to reach a place where Woj can say something like they're going to retire the Defensive Player of the Year award in his honor, I don't think any of us thought that was possible now.
Right.
I mean, because this isn't just, silly RJ Ochoa or Robbie Tizzle, speaking in the morning here. I mean, this is Woj. You know what I mean? Like, for Woj to go out on that branch is a really significant thing in my mind, not just based on his own opinion, but based on the people he talks to and interacts with. And so, yeah, I think he's over delivered, and that's where that it only exacerbates how extremely unprepared the Spurs were for actually utilizing him this season.
Well, I think as good as we thought he was going to be, he's been better. As good as I thought Wemby was going to be, he's been better than that, because I didn't expect Wemby to spend the first 2 months of his NBA career playing with Jeremy Sohan as his point guard. I don't think he thought when he started the season that was going to be the way that things were going to go. And he did. And he survived that and improved because of it. I think 2 consecutive rookies of the month is going, I can't imagine somebody else winning it unless we're tired of giving it to Victor. He's filling every box so consistently that the heat is coming. He's better than we thought, and we thought he was going to be great. We knew he was going to be good, but we didn't know he was going to be good. And I think that has sped the timeline up. And Pop deliberately tried to slow it down. So now they're in a position where they got to go do something, because Victor has outclassed everybody that's around him. He's already leapt past them, and now he's having to pull them forward. And to Devin Vassell's credit, and to others, they have kind of followed over the last couple of weeks. Now, again, we're talking about a team that's trying to win its 3rd consecutive game for the first time this season. So it's not like we have made these massive steps forward, but here's where we are.
No, but that's how much they suppressed him, Rob.
Yes.
I mean, like that is actually how much they limited him. They literally did the HEB bags on his arms all season long from lack of help standpoint. Like, please, they asked him to carry that much night in and night out. And so that they deserve extreme criticism for this. And I think that that's sort of what this is. I mean, think about what Woj said. I mean, like, it takes no disrespect to Shams, the foremost NBA, the word insider isn't even accurate at this point in time in Woj's career. So the foremost NBA dignitary to go on national television to say, dude, do something. Think about how sad that is. It's one thing, again, for us to sit here and to say it every single day at 7 a.m, which we do on Silver and Black. And if you miss it live, you can go and access it at sasportstar.com and the SA Sports Star YouTube channel. But for him to have to come out and literally spell it out like I do the alphabet for my son, A, B, it's like, okay, you got the superstar. Now you have to surround him with help, and then you have to go win titles. And actually, all this only helps you and makes you better people and furthers your own legends and your own careers. But instead, the Spurs are like, I don't know if y'all know this or not, but Zach Collins, hear us out. You know what I mean? Like, just do the thing. Do the thing that literally the whole world is asking you to do.
Well, they're going to draft high again this season. And look, they may not have a choice about where they draft in 2025, not only because of what Wembanyama wants, but because of how damn good he is. He is so good already, it's ridiculous.
They won't be one of the third worst teams in the league and have a chance.
We saw it. You see it with LeBron. The Cavs never drafted high again because LeBron was so good. It can't be stated enough. All of these things you guys are saying, you choose your words carefully when you describe a prospect. And those are the words you're saying. He has exceeded that hype.
He has exceeded the hype that was, keep in mind, the hype was, we think he's going to be the greatest player of all time. That's kind of what the hype was. We think if he does everything appropriately, he will be mentioned, if not above the greatest players ever to lace him up. And 6 months into his first year, we're going, you know what? He's better than that.
And he is dragging the kicking and screaming Spurs front office into relevance and into workmanlike attitude. And they're saying, fine, we'll give you talented players around you if you really, but don't you know that if Toronto sucks next year, we could totally have the next number 1 overall pick. And imagine if we had 2 Victor Wembanyamas.
Because there's a kid who's in the 7th grade right now that we are scouting. And in 5 years, this guy could pan out. Now, keep in mind, that's the situation we find ourselves. But there is, to the other side of this, the build and prepare. And we've watched Oklahoma City do it. We've watched over and over. We talked about Denver. They took the steps slowly, growing what they have. And there are several other teams that have gotten to title or at least into contention without anything other than time and appropriate drafting and free agent acquisition.
You don't have to do it that way.
Exactly. Listen to what Brian Windhorst says about other teams that have gone through the process, specifically the team that we're going to see tonight.
Here's why this is going to be hard, because the 2025 draft is expected to be much, much better than the 2024 draft. The Spurs have multiple picks right now in the 2025 draft, and especially theirs. And it's going to be very tempting for them to go slow, I think, because they may spend in free agency and trade, and they may only be able to get, look what the Houston Rockets did. Houston Rockets were one of the worst teams in the league last year. They said, we want to get better. They spent a bunch of money. They made a bunch of moves, and they're now in 12th. The Spurs probably don't want to do that. They probably would like to draft high again in 2025. It's going to be hard to do what I think Victor is kind of forcing them to do.
So there's the paradigm they have to deal with. And I think Windhorst hit it on the head. They thought they had more time than they do. So now suddenly the clock has been sped up. It's kind of like an RPP. He's better than we thought he was. So now it's time to adjust the plan. I think coming into it, everything was appropriate. 5 first-round draft or lottery picks in the next 2 years. Let's build, let's find out. And Pop started the season like, hell, this season's a gimme. This is a long practice. So if we're going to treat it like that, hey, Sohan, dribble the ball up. Let's see how it works. Let's see how this goes. Well, suddenly it's working, and now they're like, oh, well, here we go. We're a year ahead of schedule, so maybe those plans we thought we needed to make next year, maybe we fast forward them, but we have to do it with the backdrop of we don't know where those picks are going to land. that Toronto pick we might not get it this year, but if we don't get it this year, it might end up being better next year. So maybe we wait. I don't think they're in a position to wait anymore. I think that now is the time.
It's funny that the list of accomplishments from this season is literally taught Jeremy Sohan how to play basketball. You know, but we talk about how you don't have to do it a certain way. It feels like they're so married to doing it, not just like the process way, but like we have to have all of our draft picks hit. We have to have all of these lottery, and we have to build just a platoon of, you know, Wembys. And no, man, I mean, like, and their inability to be able to, and I don't want to say adapt on the fly, because there was nothing they could have conceivably done at the trade deadline that would have made a seismic difference, certainly relative to this season and relative to the long haul. So that's why we were willing to give them into the summer to work on this whole thing. But their potential inability to adapt to the circumstances changing is an indictment of them. It isn't an indictment of it being an RPP. It's an indictment of them as a front office, of them as a team, of them as an organization, of saying, you have to be able to say, okay, look, this dude, what an awesome RPP, to Rob's point, that this dude is a million times better than we could have possibly thought. Wow, what an amazing situation we have found ourselves in. What do we do now?
What you gonna do now?
That, you have to be. We can sit here and we can pontificate and we can speculate and we can, you know, ping and pong back and forth, but we're not the people charged with figuring that out. There are literally a handful of people on this earth who are charged with figuring this out, and you are them. You are the people who have to figure out a way to adapt and to adjust and to ultimately overcome the problem that is Victor Wembanyama being way more amazing than we could have ever anticipated. And I agree with John Dyer in the Brigade Bar. Says, I think there's a happy medium. Sign good vets and continue to draft. But a medium at this point would be like reaching so galactically far from where the Spurs are at. You have to do something. You have to move. Right. You have to get going. You have to get in the car. That is literally step one right now. And that is so sad, but you have to do that. And if you don't, then you're just going to waste this, and they're going to continue to roast you, and they should.
Keep in mind that right now, Victor is on pace to be the first player to average 20, 10, 3, and 3 since Shaq did it back in 99-2000, and he won an MVP. This is the guy that he has turned into. The clock is ticking, and it's ticking faster than it did just a couple of months ago. I see it. I think the Spurs actually see it as well. And it's a situation, it's a position that the Spurs are very uncomfortable. They've never really had to go make a move. They've never been under pressure to go get something done. Now, it was nice bringing LaMarcus in, but they always had the safety that Tim was here. Manu was here. Tony was here. So any move was going to be safe. Now it's not safe. You're going to have to gamble.
And it's one thing to gamble, but it's also one thing to gamble when everyone knows you need to gamble, right? Like
exactly.
That's what makes it so terrifying. Is that, and I'm not, you know, neither of us are willing to are going to say that it isn't terrifying, but dude, that's what makes it fun. Like that's the whole point of this. Like that's why that's supposedly what gets you out of bed every day is the chase and the drive and the willingness to take these gambles and peeing into the wind. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you have to. And this, the good news is you have this, you know, amazing player at your back. If you miss, you will fall safely into the massive hands of Victor Wembanyama.
Coming up, we're going to talk some football as the Cowboys version of Punxsutawney Phil. Dak Prescott made his winter appearance just before we spring forward. He got a new baby in tow. He's talking about his confidence level. We're going to hear from him. And Troy Aikman, the other quarterback that played there in Dallas some time ago. I understand he's actually got a couple of rings, but that's a whole other story. Lots of Dallas Cowboy talk around the NBA before we break. It struck me last night, RJ, that the West is the new East. Looking at the West, I watched Milwaukee come back and beat the Clippers. Milwaukee's there's two good teams in the East. It is Boston and Milwaukee, and the title we decided between those two dudes. Joel Embiid miracle healing set aside. But I do believe that the East is pretty cut and dried. It's a matter
Boston, and then it's 30,000 feet, and then it's Milwaukee.
Pretty much. So it feels like Boston, much like in the West for years, there's one team over there, and all they got to do is just get to the finals. If they get there, they're going to be ready, and it should be a pretty easy run. Look at the West. My goodness, the Thunder, they lost last night in a last-second shot. They're leading the West. You got the Thunder, got Minneapolis, which is, they're unquantified, but they're certainly better. We continue to look down. Phoenix, we don't even bring them up. Denver, the reigning champion. Do I need to keep going? Phoenix, the Clippers. There are 5-6 teams, all with intentions or at least talent level to win a title. That plays into the Spurs clock as well, doesn't it? Like, why would be the rush to get great now when I'm still dealing with 6 teams out there that are also really good? Maybe if I played this right, as they decline, I rise.
Well, who are the 2 oldest superstars in the game right now? Right. You've got LeBron and
Obviously.
KD, and they're aging out.
Right.
So, who are the
But Luka's still here, and Anthony Edwards is growing into it. And
Sure. I mean, but, the 2 most inconquerable people who have played it, who have dominated the NBA, your timeline also lines up with theirs.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying? Like, even the non-controllables have worked out for you. To your point, it will never be easy, right? Like, you still have Jokic and Ant, and you got, even if you get through, Jason Tatum isn't going anywhere and Boston's not going anywhere, right? Like, it won't. At no point in time will the other, teams all suck. But this is as easy of a path. This is as conquerable of a path as it has been in the NBA for a very, very, very long time. And you've got to take advantage of that.
What do you think?
Before somebody else,
Right.
has luck smile upon them the way it did you and does the right thing.
Luck always smiles upon those that try. Fortune
Wow.
favors the bold, as I've also been.